Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into a really wild story from the 16th century, a recorded account of a spiritual battle that had a very, very unusual outcome.
So, right off the bat, the source we're looking at for this explainer, which comes from the writings of Father Michael Mueller, kicks things off with this incredible, almost unbelievable premise. The idea is that God is about to use the devil himself to prove a central point of faith.
Okay, so before we get into the crazy details, we gotta set the scene. We're talking about the 1500s in Europe, which was a time of just massive religious upheaval and conflict.
And at the absolute heart of all this conflict was the Holy Eucharist. As you can see, the two sides were worlds apart. On one side, you had the Catholic Church teaching the doctrine of the real presence, the belief that the bread and wine are literally the body and blood of Jesus. But on the other side, you had these new Protestant movements, led by figures like Martin Luther and John Calvin, arguing, no, it's all symbolic.
And this is where our story really kicks off. We've got Nicola Aubrey and her absolutely brutal 3-month ordeal. And get this, the source we're pulling from claims this whole thing was allowed to happen for one specific reason, to settle that very argument about the Eucharist.
So as you can imagine, word about this possession starts to get around. And of course, that brings out the skeptics, including a group of Calvinist preachers who were convinced this whole thing was just an elaborate Catholic trick.
So, these preachers show up, right? They've got their Protestant prayer books in hand, and they are dead set on exposing this whole thing as a hoax. They're there to perform their own prayers and prove it's all fake.
Yeah, well, the welcome they got was not what they were expecting. According to the account, the demon, speaking through Nicola, just mocked them. It basically said, "You think you can fight me with those books? I helped inspire the ideas in them." And it just gets more intense from there. When one of the preachers declared he was a servant of Christ, the demon's response was brutal. It pretty much tells the preacher, "You're worse than I am. At least I believe in the real presence. You refuse to." And with that final jab, wow, totally humiliated, the preachers just left. They retreated and left the Catholic priests who were already there to handle it. All right, so with the preachers gone, the story pivots, and this is a really crucial point. The source starts highlighting one specific thing, one tool that was just unbelievably powerful against whatever was happening to Nicola.
The account draws this incredibly sharp line in the sand. You could bring in all sorts of holy relics, things that were supposed to be super powerful, and nothing, no effect. But the moment the consecrated Eucharist was brought near, the reaction was immediate. It was violent.
So naturally, this idea gets put to the test, and in a pretty scientific way for the time. You had doctors, including a Calvinist who was a skeptic, examining her limbs, which were paralyzed. I mean, they couldn't feel anything, not even when pricked with needles. First, they try unconsecrated bread from the Protestants. Nothing. But then, they use the consecrated Eucharist.
And this is presented as an absolute game changer. When that skeptical doctor saw that the regular bread did nothing, but the actual consecrated Eucharist instantly brought feeling and consciousness back to her limbs, he was done. The account says he renounced his beliefs right then and there and asked to become Catholic.
Okay, so you'd think that would be the end of it, right? A miracle, a conversion. But no, the battle was far from over. This whole thing was a grueling, drawn-out process, and it got so intense that the local bishop had to step in personally. So with the bishop now involved, the priests are putting on the pressure, and eventually, they force the lead demon to give them a number, the total number of spirits inside Nicola's body, 29. And check this out, because this is another one of those big theological points the source is trying to make. It wasn't just any command. It was the bishop's direct command, exercising his authority that forced a mass expulsion of most of the demons. And the departure of these spirits, well, it wasn't quiet. The account describes it as this horrifying physical event. Witnesses apparently heard the sound of her bones cracking, like they were all breaking at once, as some kind of vapor left her mouth.
So after that, only 3 were left. But these were the main ones, the principal demons, led by a figure the text calls Beelzebub. This was it. The stage was set for the final showdown.
And so we come to the climax. It all goes down on February 8th, 1566. And by now, a huge crowd is gathered. I mean, thousands of people are there to see how this is all going to end. And the things that are described happening next are just off the charts. We're talking about her body levitating 6 feet in the air,
so high that it supposedly lifted the 15 strong men who were trying to hold her down right off the floor with her.
And this brings us to what the source presents as the whole point of this entire terrifying ordeal. Tortured by the presence of the Eucharist, the demon is forced to make one final confession, admitting that it truly is the body of God.
The expulsion itself is described as this dramatic, almost apocalyptic event: smoke, lightning, thunder. And the text makes a point to note the timing: 3 p.m. on a Friday. The same hour Jesus is said to have died on the cross. It was meant to signify a total, final victory.
So what happened after all that? Well, in the aftermath, Nicola Aubrey was apparently completely healed, her paralysis was gone, and the impact on the crowd, which the source claims was massive, was huge. The account claims numerous Protestant witnesses converted right there on the spot.
And really, that's what this whole account builds to. It's not just a spooky story from the 1500s. The source uses it to pose a powerful question. It basically asks, look, if even the ultimate evil is forced to admit this truth, what does that mean for people of faith? It's a challenge, right? To go from a confession that's forced by torture to one that's made willingly, through belief.